The rain fell in a soft, persistent drizzle, the kind that Seattle wore like a second skin. It was late October 2024, and the city's downtown buzzed with the hum of a tech conference at the Washington State Convention Center. Glass walls reflected the gray sky, and inside, the air was thick with the energy of innovation keynotes, panels, and the clink of coffee cups. Ethan Harper adjusted his badge, the lanyard tugging slightly at his navy blazer. At 35, he carried the easy confidence of someone who'd navigated the tech world's highs and lows. His sandy hair was slightly tousled, and his hazel eyes scanned the crowded lobby, not for networking opportunities but for something less tangible. As Spock, Ethan had left a cushy software engineering job at a tech giant 2 years ago to start a nonprofit, Code for All, focused on open-source accessibility tools. It was a gamble, but he'd grown tired of building apps that prioritized profit over people. Today, he was here to speak on a panel about universal design, a topic he'd poured his heart into since realizing how many barriers technology still posed for those who needed it most. The panel room was packed, the audience a mix of developers, designers, and advocates. Ethan sat at the long table, flanked by 2 other speakers, a UX designer from a startup and a professor of human-computer interaction. He glanced at the program. Maya Torres, accessibility consultant and advocate. Her name stood out, though he hadn't heard it before. The moderator introduced the panel, and Ethan delivered his opening remarks, emphasizing how open-source tools could democratize access. The audience nodded, a few jotting notes. Then Maya spoke. She sat at the far end of the table, her wheelchair positioned just so, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun that caught the stage lights. Her voice was clear, commanding, cutting through the room's ambient hum. Technology, she began, her brown eyes sweeping the crowd, is only as good as the people it includes, and right now, we're failing millions, not because we lack the tools, but because we lack the will. She cited statistics: 27% of websites inaccessible to screen readers, 1 in 5 disabled Americans unable to use basic apps, and paired them with stories: a blind colleague struggling with a banking app, a paraplegic friend defeated by a smart thermostat's tiny buttons. Her words were sharp but not accusatory, delivered with a grace that made the room lean in. Ethan forgot his own talking points. He watched her, not just her words but her presence, the way her hands moved to emphasize a point, the way her smile softened the edges of her critiques. When the Q&A began, an audience member, a CEO type in a sharp suit, challenged her. Isn't the cost of full accessibility prohibitive for smaller companies? He asked, his tone more defensive than curious. Maya didn't flinch. Cost is a choice, she said. You budget for marketing, for cloud servers, for catered lunches. Accessibility is only expensive if you think inclusion is optional. The room erupted in applause, and Ethan found himself clapping too, a grin spreading across his face. She was brilliant. After the panel, Ethan lingered, hoping for a chance to introduce himself. The crowd thinned, and he saw her near the stage, speaking with a few attendees. Her wheelchair, sleek and customized with a subtle floral pattern on the frame, glided smoothly as she maneuvered toward the exit. He caught up just in time. Miss Torres, he called, his voice a touch too eager. She turned, her expression curious but guarded. I'm Ethan Harper, from the panel. Your talk was incredible. The way you framed accessibility as a moral imperative, not just a technical one, it hit home. Her lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes studied him, as if weighing his sincerity. Thanks, Ethan. I liked your point about open source tools, but I have to ask, how many of your projects have actually been tested by disabled users? He blinked, caught off guard but impressed. Some, he admitted, not enough. We're working on it, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can do better. She tilted her head, considering. Buy me a coffee, and I'll tell you. 2 hours later, they sat in a cozy cafe across from Pike Place Market, the scent of roasted beans mingling with the damp air seeping through the open door. Rain tapped the windows, and Maya sipped her latte, her wheelchair tucked neatly beside the table. Ethan had expected a quick chat, but their conversation stretched, weaving through accessibility, tech ethics, and then, unexpectedly, personal stories. She talked about her childhood in a tight-knit Mexican-American family in California, her love for salsa dancing before the accident, and her work as a consultant helping companies rethink accessibility. He shared his journey from corporate burnout to founding his nonprofit, his quiet hikes in the Cascades, and his habit of collecting vintage sci-fi novels. "You don't strike me as a typical tech bro," Maya said, her tone teasing but warm. "No crypto obsession, no Tesla in the garage." Ethan laughed, stirring his black coffee. "Guilty of liking Star Trek too much, but that's my worst offense. What about you? Any secret nerd habits?" She grinned, leaning forward. "I used to DM Dungeons and Dragons campaigns in college, still have my dice collection." "No way," he said, eyes lighting up. "Favorite campaign?" They were still talking when the barista announced closing time. 5 hours had passed like minutes. As they left, Ethan walked beside her, navigating the uneven sidewalk with care. A passerby glanced at them, then quickly away, and Ethan noticed Maya's jaw tighten slightly. He didn't comment, but he felt the weight of that glance, the unspoken, the assumption that he was her aide or sibling, not a man captivated by her. "Want to do this again?" he asked as they reached her accessible van. She looked up at him, her expression softer now. "Only if you promise better coffee." Their first few dates were a dance of discovery, each moment peeling back layers of who they were. They met at a waterfront park, where Maya's wheelchair glided along the smooth path, and Ethan pushed when the gravel got tricky. They laughed over tacos at a food truck, debated AI ethics at a quiet bookstore, and shared late-night texts about everything from policy to their favorite TV shows. But the world wasn't always kind. At a restaurant, a waiter handed Ethan the check without looking at Maya, assuming she wasn't paying. At a movie theater, an usher asked Ethan, "Does she need help getting seated?" As if Maya couldn't answer for herself. Each time, Maya handled it with a sharp quip or a polite correction, but Ethan saw the flicker of exhaustion in her eyes. One evening, at a dimly lit jazz bar, a stranger approached their table. "You're such an inspiration," the woman said to Maya, her voice dripping with pity. "And you," she turned to Ethan, "you're so kind to take her out like this." Maya's smile was tight. "I'm here because I love jazz, not because I need a field trip." The woman flushed and retreated. Ethan reached for Maya's hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "People are idiots," he said softly. "They're predictable," she replied, but she squeezed his hand back. At home that night, Maya stared at her reflection in the mirror. She'd built a life of confidence, advocating for herself and others, but dating always carried a shadow. Men in her past had seen her disability as a challenge to fix, a story to romanticize, or worse, a fetish to explore. She'd learned to guard her heart, to test intentions. Ethan was different. He listened. He asked questions without condescension. He saw her, but doubt lingered. Could she trust this? Could she let herself fall? Ethan, too, faced questions. At a team dinner, a colleague leaned in, voice low. "Dating Maya must be intense. I mean, the logistics. Is it worth it?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "She's worth everything," he said, and changed the subject. His sister Claire was gentler but no less skeptical. Over brunch, she stirred her mimosa, choosing her words. "Maya seems amazing, Ethan, but are you ready for what her life means? The appointments, the accessibility issues, the limitations." "She's not limited," he said firmly. "The world's the problem, not her, and I'm all in." Claire softened but didn't push further. Ethan didn't need her approval. He'd never been surer of anything than he was of Maya. 6 months into dating, Ethan planned a special evening. He'd found an accessible trail near Mount Rainier, a rare find with smooth paths and stunning views. They drove out on a crisp spring morning, the air sharp with pine. Maya wore a bright red jacket, her wheelchair equipped with all-terrain wheels Ethan had helped her pick out. They stopped at a lookout, the mountain looming against a clear sky. "This is perfect," Maya said, her breath visible in the cool air. "How'd you find this place?" "Research." Ethan grinned. "I may have called every park ranger in a 50-mile radius." She laughed, her eyes sparkling. "You're ridiculous." "Ridiculously in love," he said, and the words slipped out before he could stop them. Maya froze, her smile faltering, not from fear, but from the weight of it. She'd heard those words before, but never like this, never from someone who saw her so completely. "Ethan," she said softly, "you mean that?" He knelt beside her, his face level with hers. "I do, Maya. You're my partner, my challenge, my joy. I love you, chair or no chair, and I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes shimmered, but she blinked back tears. "You're making it really hard to stay tough," she teased. "Good," he said, and kissed her. The mountain watching over them. That night, Maya lay awake, her mind racing. She loved Ethan more than she'd let herself admit, but there was something she hadn't shared, a truth she'd held close for 2 years. At 21, after her accident, doctors had been blunt. She'd never walk again. She'd built a life around that reality, finding freedom in her wheelchair, strength in her advocacy. But 2 years ago, she'd joined an experimental therapy program, a grueling regimen of neural stimulation and physical training. Slowly, miraculously, she'd regained some movement enough to stand, to take a few steps with effort. It wasn't a cure, wasn't consistent, and came with pain and risk. She'd told no one, not her family, not her friends. She didn't want pity, didn't want to be a miracle story, didn't want her worth tied to her legs. But Ethan deserved to know. Not yet, she decided. She needed to be sure not of his love, but of its foundation. She needed to know he loved her as she was, not for what she might become. The Seattle skyline glittered against the twilight, its lights smudged by a persistent drizzle. It was May 2025, and Ethan Harper stood in a quiet corner of Gasworks Park, his hands fidgeting with a small velvet box. The park's rusted machinery loomed like silent sentinels, softened by the green hill sloping toward Lake Union. He'd chosen this spot for its accessibility, a smooth path wound through the grass, perfect for Maya's wheelchair and for its view, a panorama of water and city that felt like a promise. Tonight, he would ask her to marry him. Ethan and Maya had been together for a year, their love deepening through shared dreams and small battles. They'd faced the world's assumptions, strangers' stares, colleagues' veiled doubts, even family hesitations, but each challenge had only solidified their bond. Maya Torres, with her sharp mind and unyielding spirit, had become Ethan's anchor, his partner in every sense, and he, with his quiet resolve and unwavering support, had earned her trust, though she still held one secret close. Maya arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, her wheelchair gliding along the path, her red scarf bright against the gray evening. She wore a denim jacket over a floral dress, her dark hair loose and catching the breeze. "You look nervous," she teased, her brown eyes glinting with mischief. "What's up, Harper? Planning to pitch me a new app?" Ethan chuckled, his nerves easing at her voice. "Something like that." He knelt beside her, his knees sinking into the damp grass, bringing his face level with hers. "Maya, this past year, you've changed everything. You challenge me, you make me laugh, you make me want to be better. I don't care about the noise out there, the looks, the questions. I just want you, every day, for the rest of my life." Her breath caught, her smile faltering as she realized what was happening. Ethan opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring with a single sapphire, her favorite stone. "Maya Torres, will you marry me?" For a moment, she was silent, her eyes searching his. She'd spent years guarding her heart, wary of men who saw her as a project or a symbol. But Ethan's gaze held no pity, no agenda, just love, steady and real. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, Ethan, I will." He slid the ring onto her finger, his hands trembling slightly. She pulled him close, kissing him as the city lights flickered to life behind them. The rain didn't matter, nor did the distant hum of traffic. In that moment, it was just them, two people, choosing each other against the world's doubts. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind of joy and logistics. They chose a waterfront venue in Ballard, a restored warehouse with wide doors, smooth floors, and a view of Puget Sound. Maya wanted something intimate but bold, a celebration that reflected their love and their roots. Her dress, designed by a local Latina designer, was ivory silk with intricate embroidery, inspired by her Mexican heritage, delicate patterns of maguey leaves and stars. Ethan opted for a charcoal suit with a tie in deep sapphire, a nod to her. Ring incorporated small touches, her grandmother's silver earrings for Maya, a pair of cufflinks engraved with her initials for Ethan, gifted by her father. But the world's assumptions followed them. At a dress fitting, the tailor asked Ethan, will she need extra support to stand for the ceremony? Assuming Maya's wheelchair meant fragility, Maya corrected her with a smile, "I'll be rolling down the aisle, thanks, it's my style." At a family dinner, Ethan's sister Claire, still adjusting to their relationship, hesitated over her wine. "It's just, marriage is hard, Ethan. And with her condition isn't the challenge," Ethan cut in, his voice firm but kind. "People's attitudes are, she's my partner, Claire, not a burden." Claire nodded, chastened. "I just want you to be happy." "I am," he said, and meant it. Maya faced her own doubts, not about Ethan but about the secret she carried. 2 years ago, she'd joined an experimental neurorehabilitation program, a grueling mix of electrical stimulation and physical therapy. Against all odds, she'd regained limited movement enough to stand briefly, to take a few steps with effort and pain. She'd kept it private, even from her family, fearing it would shift how people saw her. She wasn't a miracle or an inspiration. She was Maya, whole as she was, chair or no chair. But Ethan deserved to know. She'd planned to tell him after the engagement, but each time she tried, the words caught. She needed to be sure his love was for her, not for some potential future version of her. So she waited, trusting her heart, but testing his dot. The wedding day dawned clear. A rare Seattle summer day with sun glinting off the Sound. The venue was alive with color tables draped in deep blue, centerpieces of dahlias and marigolds, and a playlist blending jazz, salsa, and indie rock. Guests filled the space. Ethan's tech colleagues, Maya's advocacy network, their families, and friends from across the country. The air buzzed with warmth, though a few whispers floated well-meaning but misguided. "He's so devoted," an aunt murmured to her husband. "She's lucky to have him." Maya caught the words, and smirked at Ethan, whispering, "Should I tell them I'm the one who booked this place?" He grinned, squeezing her hand. "Let 'em wonder." The ceremony was a blend of their worlds. Maya's brother gave a reading in Spanish, a poem by Octavio Paz about love's resilience. Ethan's best friend shared a heartfelt speech about their college days, poking fun at Ethan's sci-fi obsession. When it was time for the vows, Maya rolled to the center of the aisle, her dress shimmering under the lights. Ethan stood beside her, his eyes locked on hers. "Maya," he began, his voice steady, "you're my compass, my fire, my home. You've shown me what strength looks like, not in overcoming, but in being fully, fiercely you. I promise to stand by you, to roll with you, to love every piece of you, no matter what the world says." Maya's eyes glistened, but her voice was clear. "Ethan, you saw me when others saw a chair. You chose me, not as a project or a story, but as your equal. I promise to challenge you, to laugh with you, to build a life with you, not because it's easy, but because it's us." They exchanged rings, and as the officiant pronounced them married, the room erupted in cheers. Ethan leaned down, kissing her deeply, and Maya laughed against his lips, the sound bright and free. The reception was a blur of dancing Ethan spinning Maya's chair in playful circles, her family leading a salsa line, and friends toasting their unconventional, undeniable love. The honeymoon suite at a boutique hotel in Belltown was a haven of warmth. Candlelight flickered across the walls, casting shadows on the hardwood floor. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, and a soft jazz melody hummed from a speaker in the corner. Ethan wheeled Maya inside, her dress still trailing elegantly over her chair. He poured 2 glasses of champagne, his smile soft but bright, his tie loosened after the long day. "To us," he said, handing her a glass. "To us," she echoed, her voice quieter than usual. She set the glass down, her hands resting in her lap. "Ethan, can we sit for a moment?" He nodded, settling on the edge of the bed beside her, his eyes searching hers. "Everything okay?" She took a breath, her fingers tracing the embroidery on her dress. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've kept to myself. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I needed to be sure of us." Ethan's brow furrowed, but he stayed silent, giving her space. Maya's heart thudded, not from fear but from the weight of vulnerability. "You know my story," she began. "The accident at 20, the spinal cord injury. Doctors said I'd never walk again, and I built my life around that. My chair, my work, my identity is who I am. But 2 years ago, I joined an experimental program. Neural stimulation, physical therapy, hours of pain and effort. And slowly, I started to move again. My toes first, then my legs. Enough to stand, enough to walk a little, with effort." Ethan's eyes widened, his breath catching. You can walk." She held up a hand, her voice steady but soft. "Yes, but it's not what you think. It's short distances. It's painful. It's not reliable. I didn't tell anyone, not even my family, because I've seen how people change when they hear recovery. They see me as more valuable, more whole, as if I wasn't enough before. I needed to know you loved me as I am, Ethan, not for what I might be." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Maya, I fell in love with you, the woman who schools CEOs, who laughs at my terrible puns, who makes the world better just by being in it. If you never took a step, I'd still be the luckiest man alive. Her eyes shimmered, a tear slipping. Free, I know, she whispered. And that's why I want to show you. She shifted in her chair, her movements deliberate, with practiced strength. She braced her hands on the bed, easing her legs to the floor. Ethan watched, his heart pounding, as she steadied herself. Her knees trembled, her dress catching the candlelight. She motioned for him to stay seated. Her eyes locked on his. Then, slowly, she stood. One step, then another, each movement careful but determined. She crossed the small distance to him, her veil trailing behind her like a whisper. Ethan rose instinctively but stopped himself, letting her come to him. When she reached him, she rested her hands on his shoulders, her breath uneven from the effort. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her gently, his face a mix of awe and love. You're incredible, he said, his voice thick. Not because you walked, but because you trusted me with this. She laughed softly, a tear-streaked sound. I didn't do it to impress you. I did it because I love you, because I trust you. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the world fading to nothing. The weight of her secret lifted, replaced by a quiet peace. Ethan guided her back to the bed, helping her sit as her legs ached from the effort. You didn't have to do that, he said, brushing a curl from her forehead. I know, she replied, her smile radiant, but I wanted to. For us. They stayed up late, talking not about her steps, but about their future trips to plan, projects to tackle, dreams that had nothing to do with mobility and everything to do with love. As the candles burned low, Maya felt lighter than she had in years. Not because she'd stood, but because she'd let Ethan see her, fully. And he hadn't flinched out the morning after the wedding. Sunlight poured through the honeymoon suites, floor-to-ceiling windows, painting the room in gold. Maya Torres Harper rolled toward the mirror, her wheelchair gliding smoothly over the hardwood. Her ivory dress was folded carefully on a chair, replaced by a soft cotton top and jeans. But she still wore her grandmother's silver earrings, a quiet nod to the day before. She adjusted her hair, catching her reflection, her eyes brighter, her shoulders lighter. The weight of her secret, carried for 2 years, was gone. She'd shared her truth with Ethan, and he'd held her, not as a miracle or a project, but as his wife. Ethan leaned against the doorway, a mug of coffee in hand, his tie long discarded. Still feel like the luckiest man in the world. Mike teased, turning to face him with a playful grin. He crossed the room, setting the mug down and kissing her forehead. Even more than yesterday, he said, his voice warm with truth. Downstairs, the hotel staff bustled, clearing the remnants of the reception. A few lingering guests noticed Maya's return to her wheelchair, their glances quick but heavy with unspoken questions. An older woman, a distant cousin of Ethan's, whispered to her husband, he must really love her. She's so lucky, Maya overheard, her lips twitching with amusement. She leaned toward Ethan, her voice low. Should I tell her I'm the one who booked this whole place for our honeymoon? He chuckled, shaking his head. Nah, let her live in awe. They laughed, the sound a shield against the world's assumptions. But, as they left the hotel, rolling and walking side by side, Maya felt the shift. Sharing her ability to walk with Ethan had been a private act of trust. But it stirred something else, a need to speak, not for validation, but for visibility. She'd spent years advocating for accessibility, challenging stereotypes, but her limited mobility was a story she'd kept hidden, fearing it would overshadow her identity. Now, with Ethan's unwavering support, she felt ready to reclaim that narrative. The first weeks of marriage were a blend of joy and adjustment. They moved into a new apartment in Capitol Hill, carefully chosen for its accessibility-wide doorways, a roll-in shower, and a view of the city that made Maya's heart lift. Ethan's nonprofit, Code for All, was gaining traction, with new partnerships to develop open-source screen readers. Maya's consulting work kept her busy, advising tech companies on inclusive design and speaking at conferences across the country. Together, they navigated the rhythm of married life, mornings with coffee and shared playlists, evenings debating policy or binge-watching sci-fi shows, and the occasional challenge of Seattle's uneven sidewalks. But the world's gaze lingered. At a tech event, a colleague asked Ethan, "How's it going, with Maya's situation?" The question was cloaked in concern but laced with judgment. Ethan's response was calm but firm. We're building a life together. Her situation is just part of it, like my bad cooking is part of mine. Maya faced her own tests. At a speaking engagement, an audience member asked, "How do you stay so positive despite your disability?" The question, meant as a compliment, grated. "I'm not positive because of my disability," she said, her voice steady. "I'm positive because I've built a life I love, with people who see me for me." At home, they leaned on each other. Maya shared the exhaustion of constant advocacy, the way every public interaction felt like a performance. Ethan listened, his hand resting on hers, offering no solutions, just presence. He told her about his own struggles, pressure to scale, his nonprofit, doubts about leaving the corporate world. They didn't fix each other, they held space. Their love, a quiet rebellion against a world that wanted to define them. 3 months after the wedding, Maya made a decision. She'd been mulling it over since the honeymoon, the idea taking root as she and Ethan talked late into the night. She wanted to share her story, not the polished version the world expected, but the messy, human truth. Not to inspire, but to educate. She sat at their kitchen table, her laptop open, a draft blog post titled "Strength in Stillness" staring back at her. Ethan was at a meeting, the apartment quiet except for the soft patter of rain. She typed, her fingers steady. "I've spent my life in a wheelchair, and it's given me freedom, not limitation. It's carried me to boardrooms, stages, and the love of my life. But 2 years ago, I started an experimental therapy program. I can stand now, take a few steps, sometimes with a cane, sometimes with pain. It's not a miracle, it's not a cure, it's just part of my story. And I kept it private because I've seen how people change when they hear recovery. They see me as more worthy, as if the chair made me less. But my worth isn't in my legs, it's in my mind, my heart, my fight. This is for anyone who's been reduced to a narrative. You are enough, exactly as you are." She uploaded the post to her website, linking it to a video she'd recorded in their living room. In it, she sat in her wheelchair, speaking directly to the camera, her voice clear and unapologetic. Halfway through, she reached for a cane propped nearby, braced herself, and stood. She took 3 careful steps, her movements shaky but deliberate, then returned to her chair. "People cheer when I stand," she said, looking into the lens, "but they miss the strength it takes to roll every day. This chair isn't my weakness, it's my power." She hesitated before hitting publish, her finger hovering over the button. Ethan came home just then, his coat damp from the rain. He saw her expression, the open laptop, and sat beside her. "You okay?" "I'm about to share something big," she said, her voice soft. "The therapy, the walking. I want people to understand, not just cheer." He read the post over her shoulder, his hand resting on her back. "It's powerful, Maya. It's you." She pressed publish, and they sat together, watching the views tick up. By morning, the post had gone viral, shared across social media, picked up by disability advocacy groups, and featured on tech blogs. Comments flooded in, some praising her courage, others thanking her for challenging stereotypes. A few missed the point, calling her inspirational for walking, but Maya let those slide. She'd said what she needed to say. Ethan stayed out of the spotlight, declining interviews that tried to frame him as the heroic husband. When a reporter asked what he thought of Maya's bravery, he said simply, "She's not brave because she stood, she's brave because she waited until love was safe to share it." Life moved forward, a tapestry of ordinary and extraordinary. They traveled to Portland for a conference, navigating an inaccessible hotel with laughter and creative problem solving. They hosted dinner parties, Maya's salsa recipes stealing the show, Ethan's attempts at dessert earning good teasing. They faced tough days, therapy appointments that left Maya drained, funding setbacks for Ethan's nonprofit, but each challenge was met together. Their partnership a quiet strength. On their first anniversary, they returned to Gasworks Park, the place where Ethan proposed. The sky was overcast, the air cool with the promise of rain. Maya wore her red scarf, Ethan a jacket that smelled faintly of pine from their last hike. They sat by the water, her wheelchair parked beside a bench, his arm around her shoulders. "You know," Maya said, her voice thoughtful, "I used to think the hardest part of disability was the physical stuff, the pain, the barriers, the stairs, but it's not. It's trusting someone to see all of you, not just the parts they can fix or celebrate." Ethan nodded, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. You trusted me. That's the greatest gift I've ever gotten. She smiled, leaning into him. You made it easy. He pulled a small gift from his Paquita leather-bound journal, its first page inscribed in his neat handwriting. I fell in love with a woman who rolls. I married one who walks. But I'll grow old with the one who moves the world, no matter how she gets there. Maya read it, her throat tight. You always say the right thing, she said, her voice catching. Just the truth, he replied, kissing her temple. They stayed until the rain began, light drops dotting their clothes. Maya reached for her wheelchair, rolling toward the car, with Ethan beside her. The world still stared sometimes, still whispered, but it mattered less now. They'd built something stronger than assumptions, something real. 2 years later, on their 3rd anniversary, they celebrated at a community center in Seattle, hosting an event for accessibility advocates and tech innovators. Maya spoke, her wheelchair a familiar presence, her cane nearby. For moments she chose to stand. Ethan introduced a new open-source tool from his nonprofit, designed with Maya's input to improve app navigation for disabled users. The room was filled with friends, colleagues, and strangers inspired by their work and their love. As the event wound down, they danced, Maya in her chair, Ethan guiding her in gentle spins. The music was soft, a jazz tune they'd played at their wedding. A young woman approached, a new advocate Maya had mentored. You two make it look so easy, she said, her eyes bright. Maya laughed, shaking her head. It's not easy, it's just us. Ethan grinned, adding, and a lot of coffee. Later, as they drove home, Maya looked out at the city lights, her hand resting in Ethan's. They'd faced stares, doubts, and their own fears, but they'd also built a life of honesty, laughter, and purpose. The road ahead wasn't perfect there. Be more barriers, more questions, but they'd walk it, or roll it, together. The story of Ethan and Maya spread quietly, not as a fairy tale but as a testament to love that sees beyond labels. Maya's blog post, Strength in Stillness, became a touchstone for advocates, taught in accessibility workshops, and shared by those who saw themselves in her words. Ethan's nonprofit grew, its tools making tech more inclusive, one line of code at a time. And through it all, they remained just Ethan and Maya, partners, equals, each other's home. On a quiet evening, as they sat on their balcony, overlooking the sound, Maya turned to Ethan. Still the luckiest man in the world, she asked, her voice light but her eyes deep. He smiled, pulling her close. Always. And as the rain fell, soft and steady, they held each other, their love a light that no storm could dim.